the Sacramento Kings, after a disappointing start to the season, culminating with losing 6 games in a row and then firing their head coach, the Kings have been on fire since then, despite playing multiple games without De'Aaron Fox. I think it's the last 2. And we're going to really break down what's happening in Sacramento. This is one of the most exciting teams in the sport right now, out of nowhere, with their recent double overtime thriller over Miami. And Geoff, we have to start here. There's nowhere else we can start other than Keon Ellis. You and I have been talking about Keon Ellis since the beginning of the season. We both had assumed that Ellis would be, of course, a crucial piece to their team. In our offseason preview, we said that Ellis would probably have to play a minimum of like 30 minutes per game. He's going to have to be this elite 3-and-D guard who's a strong connective passer. And that's the only way Sacramento is going to get to their ceiling. And then the season starts and he's getting DNPs and he's getting games where he's playing 15 minutes or less. And we're so confused. Keon Ellis is a guy who in his minutes last season showed how incredibly additive he is with his on-ball and off-ball defense, his great 3-point shooting on high volume. I thought he showed glimpses of very strong connective passing and even some pull-up mid-range shots here and there as well. And then the Kings bring in another ball-dominant player like DeMar DeRozan. That means to us, to people who think about the game like we do, the importance of a player like Keon Ellis becomes even more critical. So not only do you need players who can make an impact without the ball, obviously you need that when you have 3 ball dominant type players, but you also desperately need shooting for the spacing. You need defense to go around these initiators who aren't the best defenders, even though Sabonis is much better defensively than he gets credit for. But it just didn't make sense. And in my opinion, the whole reason why there should have been hope for this experiment in Sacramento and bringing DeRozan in to go along with Fox and Sabonis, that could be successful, was the very fact that they have Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray. These are the 2 guys who are perfectly suited to make this experiment go well. And then he wasn't playing. Guess what? Now he is playing. And he is crushing, and the Sacramento Kings are crushing with Keon Ellis playing big minutes for the Kings in the post-Mike Brown era. Sacramento's defense has been 5th in the entire NBA. Keon Ellis is 87th percentile in defensive EPM and 97th percentile in defensive LeBron, and a cool plus 15 per 100 differential when he plays versus when he doesn't. What do you got on Keon Ellis, and how exciting is this for Sacramento?
Yeah, I love just this episode. I feel like, our goal for these episodes is to keep them nice and sweet, but you and I could just sit here and talk about this team for hours, because this isn't about one player, even though Keon Ellis, we can talk about how great he's been forever. This is about a pure synergistic improvement. That is what this symbolizes. And if you want to get smarter as an NBA basketball fan, studying what is happening in Sacramento right now could help you so much, because I think most people would agree that in a complete vacuum, Keon Ellis isn't as good as De'Aaron Fox. He isn't as good as Malik Monk. He probably, even though he's a bit older, isn't even as good as DeMar DeRozan right now. But when you pair those 3 together, there are so many diminishing returns, and there's so much redundancy in how they compile their impact and the spots they like to play from, the profile with which they play, that the overall whole, when the 3 of them play together, is going to be so much less than the sum of their parts. So when XJ says that Keon Ellis is an additive player, what he means is that when Keon Ellis is his best self, he does not take anything off the table from the players he plays with. Everything he gives you is just purely an addition to the whole. He's not stepping on anybody's toes. He's not saying, oh, well, we have to give Keon Ellis the ball, so that means De'Aaron Fox can't have the ball. No, Keon Ellis is playing off the ball. He's providing the offense gravity, because if you're a defender and you don't stay tied to Keon Ellis, he's shooting 43% or over 40% on decent volume from 3 over the past year and a half. So that helps De'Aaron Fox. He elevates the ball handler in a way that doesn't get in his way. And then you talk about a guy like Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray had probably the worst stretch of his entire NBA career to start the season. Let's hypothesize why that could be. Well, you put him in a lineup with DeMar DeRozan, Malik Monk, and De'Aaron Fox, and Keegan Murray's the only one who can provide any semblance of defense on the wing, and he's their only real catch-and-shoot three-pointer responsible for all the off-ball gravity. This is just overburdening the hell out of him, and one is going to affect the other. Keegan Murray has to chase everybody around. Think about the game they played against the Heat. You have Tyler Hero out there on the perimeter. Well, now you have Keon Ellis chasing him around. Maybe that helps Keegan Murray impact in other areas of the game. Maybe Keegan Murray got those 5 offensive rebounds and was more locked in on that side of the ball because he wasn't overtaxed defensively. Basketball is so interconnected, and all of these things affect each other. And Keon Ellis is like the poster of this. He is the poster of how can my presence make my teammates better in non-traditional ways. People think about making your teammates better. They think about Nikola Jokic. They think putting the ball on a platter for a teammate so they have an easy shot. That's not the only way you can make your teammates better. And what we're seeing right now in Sacramento is an example of how somebody's presence can intrinsically improve the impact of their teammates even without directly affecting it.
Yeah, I think that was great. And I want to say you talked about kind of an aspect of basketball that we don't often think about. And I think it's like kind of allocating burden, whether that's offensively or defensively. You know, when we talk about someone like Keegan Murray kind of having all of this defensive burden on him, I think that does, affect other aspects of his game, whether it's his ability to offensive rebound. And you've posited at many cases, his ability to shoot well, given just the energy expenditure. And I think that this is something that we often think about in one way. Oh, we have a ball dominant player. And so that player is soaking up all of this usage, allowing these other players to play defense harder. But it works in both directions. You know what I mean? And that's something that I think that a lot of people don't really consider so deeply. To me, a really awesome aspect of the other part that you said about how basketball is so interconnected and intertwined, I'm thinking about the fact of, for the Kings, is when De'Aaron Fox is back, how do they incorporate both Fox and DeRozan moving forward? And I think we have already some insights into that. And so looked at some of the lineup data for the Kings. Fox and DeRozan, they've played together for 1,700 possessions. They have a net differential of minus 1.9 per 100 possessions, over 1,700 possessions in that two-man pairing. In the 330 possessions that those two have shared with Keon Ellis, they are plus 14.1 per 100 possessions. That's a 16-point difference when you simply make sure one player is on the court with them. And obviously, it's a small sample size. This is not something that you can write home about and just say, oh, we got the data, case closed, we can move forward. But I do think it is indicative of like some of this like burden shifting, balancing, synergy, all of these interconnected pieces, the skill sets, making sure that they work together and balance one another. I do think that is reflected in this data that you can see. And I also think that something that we should note is that DeRozan without Fox in over 600 possessions is plus 14.4 per 100. Amazing. Fox without DeRozan in 1,015 possessions, plus 5.2 per 100. Not as crazy, amazing, but also really good. I think a solid blueprint for kind of incorporating Fox with DeRozan as the Kings move forward with this kind of new look, new approach, new mentality. The defense is playing really well. Christie has them just geared up and hyped up like you wouldn't believe. I think moving forward, the blueprint is to stagger these guys, Fox and DeRozan, as much as possible. And when they do play together, you make sure Keon Ellis is on the court with them to optimize the defense and the spacing. And I think that we could see the Kings really catapult themselves somewhere into some kind of conversation in the West that doesn't include the top three, but somewhere in there. And I think that'll be really awesome for Sacramento fans if they're able to kind of figure out that balance.
Yeah, especially because they've played so many more home games than road games. I think it's too late for them to get that high. I don't think it's too late for them to eclipse the play-in. I think they can definitely, and they could flirt with home court advantage if they do these things. I think you want to go a step further with what you were just talking about. You look at the Wowie the Wowie data for all the combinations, and the one without Keon Ellis, like you alluded to, they're losing by over 2 points per 100 possessions when Monk, DeRozan, and Fox are on the court. You take Fox off the court, and then it's Keon Ellis, Monk, and DeRozan. That lineup's winning by almost 24 points per 100 possessions. Okay, and then you take Monk off the court, and then it's Fox, Ellis, and DeRozan. That lineup's winning by almost 18 points per 100 possessions. And this is why it's so interesting, because this isn't a criticism of Fox or Malik Monk, the player. We're well past the 90s when you had Bill Simmons saying stuff like the Ewing theory. This isn't, De'Aaron Fox is a loser and the team doesn't. No, we know De'Aaron Fox is a great basketball player, even though he's probably, he's off to a slow start. He hasn't been quite as good as he was the last couple of years, but there's no reason to think he's actually fallen off. I think it's reasonable to expect him to see some positive regression. De'Aaron Fox is an excellent basketball player, but if you stick him with Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan, there's just too much redundancy. Keon Ellis isn't better than De'Aaron Fox, but you could theoretically make the argument that if you had to have Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan on the court, that Keon Ellis actually is a better basketball player than De'Aaron Fox in that exact paradigm. And that would sound insane to people. Some people would find that absolutely blasphemous, but it's just how synergy in modern basketball works. And so Doug Christie has done a better job than Mike Brown in terms of infusing these types of synergistic lineups. But if the Kings are going to hit their ceiling, they have to fully embrace the idea that you have these on-ball creators and you have these primary two additive pieces in Keegan Murray and Keon Ellis. Those two need to be the core of most lineups, and it's the other side that needs to be staggered. It's Monk and Fox and DeRozan who can't just be on the court at all times. You look at some of these minutes in the box scores when Mike Brown was coaching, you had DeRozan playing over 40 minutes a game. You had Fox leading the league in minutes. You had Monk joining the starting lineup and playing 35 minutes a night. There's no chance for these guys because they weren't seeing, and there was no room for Keon Ellis. There was no room for him. There was barely room for Keegan Murray. There was no chance. You have to embrace the synergy that Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray bring. This is the path forward for them, and this is the chance for them to hit their ceiling.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's so exciting to me, kind of, that Doug Christie is so all in on it, it seems. As soon as he came in, Keon Ellis is immediately playing big minutes. I don't think he did his first game, but since then he's been playing huge minutes, obviously in the most recent double overtime game, almost 50 minutes. But, we're looking at 49 minutes and then 24, 34, 38, and 20 for Keon Ellis since Doug Christie has taken over. So I think he's just really embraced this perspective and kind of understanding a lot of this synergistic benefits that we're seeing. And even if Keon Ellis may miss a rotation at times, take an extra gamble that he shouldn't, trying to get a steal and things that you may see Mike Brown not necessarily trust him for, I think there's a recognition that just the benefits totally outweigh some of the negatives that could be happening in a really micro way. And I think looking at the game from this more macro perspective is something that's really cool that Doug Christie is bringing. And for me, it actually gives the Sacramento Kings a huge positive kind of perspective on the rest of the season. I'm excited to continue to watch them play.
Absolutely. And, we talk about Doug Christie. If you're new here, we're a data and film-driven podcast. That's where most of our perspectives come from. In preparing for this episode and watching more Kings, to me, it's impossible to ignore just the absolute overhaul in vibes and atmosphere that Christie has brought to the sideline. He's clearly pumped to have this chance. And these games in Sacramento have been just night and day difference. It's been wild to watch. It's been really cool to watch. And I hope they keep it going. I'll be interested to see what Christie does when Fox comes back. Because, look, I think if you see Keon Ellis go back to the bench, it's just going to go back to the way it was. And you need Monk to take that 6-man role, and you need to stagger their top 3 scorers. I think that's clearly the best path forward for them.
Yeah, and I agree with you, of course. And we, we've talked and spent most of this time talking about, some of the quote unquote role players and the additive nature of what they bring to the court. Obviously, DeRozan's been fine for them. I think I'm a huge De'Aaron Fox fan. Like, I think he's an underrated player, and I think just his rim pressure and what he does with being able to be stopped on the perimeter in a one-on-one capacity is so valuable for them. The best player on the Kings is Domantas Sabonis, and Domantas Sabonis is having another dominant impact season right now, up to 97th percentile in EPM, overall EPM, which is incredible to see. Given that he's been paired and spent a ton of minutes with guys that he may not really mesh the most with, like in a DeMar DeRozan. He's added a little bit more 3-point shooting, not a ton more volume, but definitely more. And also basically doesn't miss from three now when he takes those shots. Hit a big three in the double overtime game against the Heat as well. I think that he just needs to get a lot more acclaim kind of on a national stage. And I think that if they play well and they play these kind of lineups and the Kings really go on this surge that we may see them go on, I think there's going to be a lot more Domantas Sabonis noise. He was in some flirting with some kind of like, low level MVP conversations early in the season. If it wasn't last season, it was the year before. But I just think that this guy is so good and really doesn't get sort of like the credit that he really deserves based on his impact and how good he's been over the course of his career.
Yeah, I mean, right now he's an all NBA player. No doubt, fringe second team, but definitely third team All NBA. And bringing up Sabonis is a good chance for new listeners to see what we're about, because I have to be honest, I'm gonna unveil some secrecy here. I have never been a Sabonis guy. Not when he was in Indiana.
Oh, interesting.
When the Pacers traded him for Halliburton, I thought it was a fleece. Got in arguments last year with people who thought the Kings won the trade. I laughed at them. I still love Halliburton. But what we do here at High Hand Theory is we analyze as objectively as possible. I have every individual incentive to try to suppress what Sabonis is doing, write it off as luck. But you can't do that if you look at the data. He's been remarkable this season. He's having his best offensive and his best defensive season per EPM in an already very, very impressive career. He's doing everything better. He's scoring at the rim better. He's, like you said, he's hitting threes better. And look, you watched this game against the Heat last night. He was suffocating on Bam Adebayo. I did a thread on Keon Ellis on our Twitter account today. There was a possession where Keon Ellis was waiting to double team Bam Adebayo in the mid post. He was just waiting to help off of Jaime Jaquez Jr. And Sabonis' defense on ball was so good that Keon Ellis had the wherewithal to not take that step forward, stay attached to Jaime Jaquez so that no backdoor cut could be made, no pass could be there, and boxed him out and secured the rebound. That starts with Sabonis. That's great on-ball defense. He absolutely dominated that matchup against Bam Adebayo. He's always been an incredibly intelligent player. And another reason why it's awesome that we're talking about Sabonis is because he's been good defensively, but he's been so in a very non-traditional way. And what I mean by that is almost everybody associates elite big man defense with rim protection. And Sabonis gets this negative reputation defensively because he's not a traditional rim protector. He's not Anthony Davis or Giannis Antetokounmpo or any of the elite rim protectors. He's good at defense in his own way, through placement, through great hands, through defensive rebounding, which is a part of defense. He's doing all this while being a primary hub on a very, very good top 10 offense. They're up to 7th in offense right now. So Sabonis has been marvelous. Happy to eat any crow regarding him because he's been really, really good. And just, yeah, he's going to play big minutes. And with how he's defending, it used to be that guys like Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray were even more necessary because you needed to be great at the point of attack because Sabonis was more of a sieve. He wasn't protecting the rim. Now he is providing that defensive impact in his own way. Again, the domino effect. This takes pressure off of your primary defenders and it helps them impact in other ways. This is all interconnected. There's all this interplay and the Kings have a lot going for them right now.
Yeah, you know what? I really appreciate your admission. I think that's big of you to do. And definitely that I'm just kidding because I would say the same thing. I've just been a Sabonis fan, and I think, you know, part of that is aesthetics. Like, I love his passing, I love his kind of brutality, his strength in the post, and like his rebounding, some of those kinds of things that I really am a fan of. And I do think it's going to shine even more now. I just want to say real quick before the last thing I want to say on this pod is just looking at Sabonis in terms of his LeBron. So B-Ball Index has an impact metric called LeBron, which tries to measure what the overall impact of a player and condense it down to a single number. And it does a relatively good job at doing that. Domantas Sabonis, since he's been 22 years old, if we just look at his LeBron starting from 2019, he was 93rd percentile, 95th, 85th, 95th percentile, 97th percentile, 98th percentile, 97th percentile. To me, this is a criminally underrated player throughout his entire career. And I think it's for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. You know, his rim protection hasn't always been the best, but he has always been solid defensively because of all the other things that he does. And he's always been an incredible offensive player. So I'm excited to see him thrive. I'm excited to see him being put in lineups where he can thrive the most and actually make other guys a lot better with all of his amazing passing and DHO hub abilities at the top of the key. And I think if we see a renaissance here in Sacramento, is going to be because at the end of the day, because of this firing of Mike Brown that many people were against. And I understand Mike Brown with his reputation in the league and his kind of long-standing reputation as a really strong coach. I think that this is sort of showing that there needs to be an acceptance and understanding of like the next wave of like how we're thinking about basketball, which is synergy and space and all of these other interconnected pieces. And that's going to be the only way that teams are going to be able to keep up with some of these elite teams in the modern era. And the Kings are now starting to do that. And so that's really exciting.
Absolutely exciting. I think I have nothing left to add. That was great. Well heard by me.
If this is your first time listening to our podcast, this is the Hot Hand Theory podcast. That is Geoff. I'm XJ. And why don't you subscribe and see what else we have in store? Until then, this has been Hot Hand Theory.